Okay, so we're recording now. And no one showed up, so I'm just going to go ahead and do the demo. What I was going to talk about, there are two topics today, spontaneous watercolor and the diptych, which is the formal drawing at the end of the module. So the first thing I was going to do is just show you something that if you're interested in doing, you can get these on Amazon or you don't even have to have these. These are little pans that watercolors come in. I buy them empty. And I'm going to use these so that I don't have to keep opening them up. And they will dry in here, and then I will just be able to use them directly from these little pans. And I'm going to keep them in this old candy tin. So it's a candy tin, looks like Altoids. So probably fast forward through this. So I was going to show you that like watercolors do come in pans. These are all half pans. I find it frustrating to use the half pans because they're so small. That's why these have not been used all that much. But one of the things that you're going to want to do with the spontaneous watercolor is not just to start out like by wetting your paper and adding some colors to it, but you're going to want to try to first develop an idea of what colors that you want to use. You probably want to figure that out and then have an idea in your mind of what you want to do instead of just haphazardly starting to throw a lot of colors on there. So I have my blues and my reds. So first thing I'm going to do is what I have already done after I do the yellows is take down my paper. The reason I take down my watercolor paper is because once watercolor paper gets a little wet, it starts to buckle. If you don't have any paper, any tape, you can still do it. I'll do one without any paper, and I'll do one, without taping it down, and I'll do one with it taped down. So those are all the Daniel Smith colors. This is the Windsor. If you have the kit, you have that one, and you can add that also to your palette. But I'm just going to stick these in here. And these will dry, and then you can re-wet them the same way that tin that I showed you of the semi watercolors I have. But these are not magnetic, so they're not going to stick. If you have little magnets, you can put them on there, but more easily, you can just put a drop of glue and set it down, and it dries. And it's not going to be permanent because you can just sort of like take a knife and pull it out if you wanted to pull it out for some reason. So I have my watercolors. I have my paper taped down. And I'm going to show you first a couple of spontaneous watercolors from previous demos that I've done. So like this is one that I did, and then I just added, this was a backwash, and so this was like a bloom here. And so what I did, I took advantage of that, and I made it like a little landscape, like these are trees along the edge of a cliff where it's going down. So, and then that became sky. You don't have to do the spontaneous with anything specific in mind, like this is one. It just has color. Here's where the salt is for the textural elements. You can see it closer up. So I'm going to just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to do it two different ways. The first time I'm going to do it, I'm going to first wet my entire paper. So take the brush, the same brush that you guys have. And if you have a spray bottle, you can also use a spray bottle. I'll start out by using my brush just to show you how you can do that. I'm going to put water on the entire surface. That way I'm going to have all soft edges. If I wanted to have some hard edges where you can see the paint stops, you would not put any water there. So this is one method. I'm doing this one wet and wet. So the paper's already wet. And of course, the watercolor that I put down is going to be wet too, because that's what watercolor is. Pigment with diluted with water. Also the gum arabic. Gum arabic is what makes it dry and then allows it to re-wet, because gum arabic is water soluble. A lot of manufacturers add honey so that when you just touch them, even if they're dry, you just touch them and they re-wet very easily. So mine are wet now, they're gonna be dry. And I did this also because I think I'm gonna go on when you do the urban sketching, I'll probably go out to a park or something and then take those with me. You don't really have to take them with you, because you can just do your sketching, your pencil sketching, and then go back and do your watercolors. But we'll talk more about that when you get there. So you can see that my paper is already buckling a bit because it's wet. A lot of times what artists do is they'll soak the paper and then they'll tape it down with a water, like a craft paper that can take the water, and then when it dries, they work on it. That's kind of a hassle, and we don't need to do that for our purposes. So I'm going to say that I'm going to do something with an analogous color scheme, and maybe stick with maybe some green and yellow and blue right around here. So my hands are yellow, my phthalo blue, my French ultramarine. So let's see. And I'm going to use for my mixing tray, I'm just going to use this that came with that palette. And one of the things that I want to do is look at my water, see how much water. I have water in the spray bottle. So wherever I see it's already dried a little, I'm just going to add a little bit of water so that I do get the dispersion of the color as I put it down. And the reason I want to mix it here is I want to see, I wasn't using red. That's okay. The hands are yellow is here. And you might want to do this before you wet your paper. I'm okay because I sprayed it. So this is my ultramarine. They look the same until you start to disperse them. You can see that's the blue-green. So I'm going to add more water. I don't want it to be so brilliant. And since I don't want it to be so brilliant, I'm going to add a tiny bit of the scarlet red because it's the complementary color, and it's going to tone it down a little bit because phthalo blue is a really artificial bright color. Also, by adding more water, I can do that. And I'm going to use one of my droppers. Usually you can see me in that little frame, but I don't know why it's like making this camera my main camera. And then I have to, when I say switch cameras, it just gives you this camera in both scenes. So I also wanted, oh, I was going to do the ultramarine blue also. I think I need more of my yellow. So some of that. The hands are yellow. And I was going to do ultramarine also blue. So using both blues. This is the ultramarine. No, that's the same one. Sorry. So what I'm going to do is just wipe out that palette. You can see how that's the blue-green. Like I said, they're hard to distinguish until you see the colors in your palette. So this is the one that I haven't put out yet. Ultramarine blue. And if you're familiar with watercolors, you can fast forward because the end of this video, I'll just talk a little bit about the diptych you're going to do. So I'm going to let the colors kind of blend on my page. And I want to see how wet. I get a lot of cat hairs because my cats are everywhere. So I'm going to just, I guess, ignore that for now. I can always pull it off later. So I'm just going to start putting down some color and see where that takes me. So spontaneous, because even though I've plotted out some of the colors I'm using, I don't have a specific plan of how it's going to end up looking. There's a little bit of a Japanese feel to it now. Landscape. So one of the things that you can do also, and since I have this taped down, I'm going to have to move these things, is that because you have a lot of water on your page, you can then start to have it flow. Move it around on your page this way. The colors are going to blend more when you do that. So you just want to be aware of that. And now, another element that you need to have for your spontaneous watercolor is some sort of texture. Because I used the ultramarine blue, you can see that I'm getting a lot of granulation. So if you wanted, you could just use the fact that you have granulation there. You can see that the buckling actually created these very specific lines. That's okay. We'll see what we can do. If I want to add more color to kind of use that, or do I want to take out some of this water? If I don't take this water out, I'm going to get blooms all along where there's more water. So that has a very specific lining to it now, but that's okay. If I wanted to distract from that, I can add some textural elements. But I think first I'm going to add a little bit more paint. So at this point, it's not going to disperse as much as it was before. So I could go in and put some areas where I want darker color, more intense color. I'm going to try it here with the yellow. And I'm getting hard edges here because the paper has dried. So you can see here the dispersal. And I think I'm going to put some of the phthalo up in here. Down here. So it's really a way, this assignment is really a way to get you to kind of play with your watercolors, explore with them, be a little bit freer, and see what happens. you have to ink over this when you're done. And you can ink on it using what's here already, the way that I did this one, but you can also just do a drawing arbitrarily on top of it in ink. So I'm going to take out a little bit of this extra water because I don't want huge blooms there. And I think I'm going to put a little bit of yellow in here. Just a little bit. And maybe that's it for color. But I do want to do some texture, so I'm going to use salt and put some salt. Try to distract from, or maybe reinforce that fold. So that's one. You can see here I have water pooled. I'm going to pull it up with the brush. And what I'm doing is just kind of using this rag to dry the brush. The salt takes a long time to dry, so I won't be able to take the salt off during this demo, but I am going to pull the tape off. Oh, look, the paper came off. This is a new paper I was testing called Vision, Strathmore Vision watercolor paper. So that didn't work too well, does it? Or very easily. All right, so now that I took the tape off, I can move this aside just to let it dry. I think the watercolor paper that you have is better than that paper. So now this is just cut a little differently. This is still 140-pound watercolor paper. This is the front side. The front side usually has more texture on it. A little bit of dirt, that's okay. So this time I'm going to use some different colors. I'm going to use maybe like the ultramarine blue again, but this time I'm going to use the red. I'm going to dot out the blue out from the palette here. I don't think you can see that there. So I'm going to use a clean water to add water to the red. I don't know what I did with my other dropper. So I'm using the cool red, which is the quinacridone, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. Red, or quinacridone rose. And this is a very strong color, so I am going to dilute it a little bit more. Ultramarine is not quite as strong, but still a strong color. This is the ultramarine. Yes. So a little bit more. So you can see why you might want to have those actually glued down, or just a piece of, even a piece of your kneadable eraser would stick them to the bottom. And you don't have to use these. You can use like bottle caps or something and let the watercolors dry in those if you like to use painted watercolor, preferable to the wet watercolors. I actually like both, but I thought for this I would show you how you can do that. So now I have a dry paper, so I'm doing dry, wet on dry. So I could and you can see that you're going to get some hard edges. And if you want to soften them, you can use a spray bottle, if you have a spray bottle, to keep the paint sort of flowing. maybe I want to then drop in maybe I want to drop in some mixed color. Soften it a little. And maybe put in I like that sort of fall. So I don't think I'm going to do anything else down up there, but maybe I will. And so far I've just used 2 colors on here, and that might be all that I do with this one. Might just soften these a little. So they almost make like a bloom right there, which is fine because you do want to have some textural elements somewhere. Maybe that hard edge there. And I just lost my watercolor, my waterfall. But I can do that and get some of that back. But I want to pick up some of this. And I think that's okay. Naturally be this way oriented too when you do your drawing. So I think I'm done. So right now, if I leave all this water that's pooled at the bottom, it's going to make a big bloom. So how much water is there? I don't think there's that much water. I'm going to let it dry and see whether or not it does a bloom. Oh, one other thing I was going to show you, I might as well show you on here, was that you can take, like, this is a fountain pen I have, but you can use any pen, really. And while it's still wet, you know, you could go in and so I'm going to say, like, maybe I just want to draw some random thing, like maybe there's a sofa floating in here. And it's kind of one of those old-fashioned antique sofas that has these arms like this. It comes out. Here's the bottom chair. You know, my pen is not working well on this. So here. I think I need my medium point. This is a fine point. And here's my medium point. Let's see. Well, I'm just gonna do sort of a random, and this is just an fountain pen ink. And you can't really tell what it is, but that's okay because this is a spontaneous watercolor. So don't know what it is. It's just sort of floating in there. And that's okay. So you can do ink on here while it's still wet. Just know that it's going to bleed. But you can get a nice technique with it. I think that it looks funny because it's just there. So maybe I'm going to just add some sort of like dots. So that color will be in other areas. Can't tell what it is because it's blurry. And not so well drawn either. So I don't really like that dot being so big. Maybe if I put some little dots in it and did something to give it a different character. Oh, this is actually green ink, so I do have another color in there. That's okay if you want to use colored inks if you have any. So now I have my spontaneous watercolor and I've inked it. But it's very wet. I'm going to move it out of the way. I did want to show you that with watercolor, you can also use dry brush, and you can use the dry brush technique if you want with this assignment. Might be a little hard with this brush, but you can still do it. It's easier to do with a flat brush, but you only have one brush. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to separate the hairs a little. And so with dry brush, this is not working, dry brush. Right now, this is just sort of wet brush, but if I need to have strong color on there, separate. I can't do it with this brush. Try again, try one more time. Maybe using a stronger color. No, it's really too hard to use this brush for dry brush. Since I already put color on here, you can use dry brush techniques, like if you wanted to suggest. So let's put some blue and green up here. And then say you wanted to have this be sort of more green. So I'm going to take more yellow. Maybe like a grassy field here. And so you can see that you can get texture by using a dry brush. I can't separate the hairs, but I can still get a dry brush technique because you can see how the dry brush leaves gaps in the color. So this would be like a nice sort of landscape image that you could do. one of the things that I might do would be to put some different color in here. See what happens. If I then try to pull it out, pretty, I want to use a blue. Almost like a horizon. And if I use, well, I was trying to use clear water, but not really what I expected. And if I don't like it, I can take my rag and blot out some of it. And then go back in and use this green again. So then you would ink over it. I'm going to do another one because I want to show you some other textural ideas that you can use besides the salt. You can use, so if I put down, let's see, let's use the other red as well as this red. So use this part of my tin to mix this red. This red is really more like an orange, highball red. And I'm going to add a little bit of the twin rose so that it's not so orange, but more of a red, more of a fire engine red. A little bit more. Still want a little bit more. Okay, so I'm going to deposit some water by using a spray bottle, which is going to make it more random. That's okay. And you can see how that dispersal. So this is using much more intense color. I didn't really dilute it that much. You can see here, this is more diluted. And I'm going to add some ultramarine blue. Tripod cat. Not the one that's sick. So I don't like what's going on there so much, so I'm going to try lifting some of that color. And you can see what happens when you lift color. I think I'm going to leave it like that. I kind of like that sort of broken window kind of effect. And to add some more textural element, this is actually alcohol in here. You can use alcohol. See how much water has pooled there? I don't want to pull it all up, but I don't want to have a huge gloss bloom there, so I did pull some of it out. And I can disperse that too. I'll show you what happens when you spray alcohol. So it's pretty dramatic. I think I might do that all up there and leave this different down here. So can I make this travel through there? And that's it. I'm done with this one. So those are just some options of how you can approach the spontaneous watercolor assignment. I'm going to move this out of the way and let it dry as it is. And I'm going to go back to the first one that we did, and you can see how it's drying. You can see I have blooms here. That's from the salt. This bloom is from excess water, which, you know, can be intentional or can be not intentional. It's up to you. This one that is drying looks like that. This one where I tried to draw something, but it didn't come out as good as I thought it might. I've done it before. See if I have that here that I can show you. I think it's in my sketchbook. I don't know where it is. All right. So anyways, you can try that. You can experiment. You can use up to 3 papers of your watercolor paper, and you'll still have enough for the semester. So is there anything I wanted to, oh, another thing that you could do with these is that you can take saran wrap, like there's still water here wet, and you can push that down on it and then let it dry, and it's going to dry with sort of like a broken glass type of effect, which might be a nice counterpoint to this on this one. So I'm going to move that out of the way. I'm going to bring this one back. You can see that some of the alcohol effect has diminished a little. So what's going to happen? Can I enhance that? Yes. I didn't really want it down here. So I might just put in some color here. And here I have a pool of water, and I was going to show you that another way to lift color is by using like a sponge. This is one of those like magic erasers, and you could actually like clean watercolor off your page with it. But right now, so it leaves a little bit of a texture. I do that. And pull up that water. You can also take pieces of wax paper or parchment paper and put it down in an area that has wet color. And it's going to do something similar to what you did with the, what I was doing with the saran wrap. And you would leave it on there till it dries. And you would get some sort of texture like that. So I think that's it for the spontaneous watercolor. And I'm going to, I have a lot of color there, so I'm just going to put that aside. I'm not going to close it. Same with this. Over. Switch out from watercolor to my this drawing paper. Oh, one more thing I did want to show you. Sorry. So like, oh, you might want to do in your diptych, you might want to do a landscape scene. And I just wanted to show you a really quick way to do clouds. So my brush is dirty, and that's not a problem because I can just mop it up. You want to be careful about doing this on watercolor paper because watercolor paper is a little bit fragile and you'll start to pull up the paper. So I'm bringing back my watercolor. And I have this blue. I'm going to add a little bit of green to it and a little bit of red to tone it down. So I'm going to put this sort of moody blue sky color and sort of just putting it everywhere. And I'm going to get rid of some of those brush strokes. And you could just have a sky that looks like that. These edges are kind of messy. You would want to clean those up and not have too many brush strokes showing. Blue is a granulating color, so you're going to get some granulation. But another thing you could do is if you want to have clouds, you can take some tissue paper. This works better if it's taped down, but you can still do it even if you don't have tape. And if you have like a smooth surface, you're going to pull up like puffy clouds. Those are kind of you can wad this up more and pull up smaller areas, and it looks more sort of chaotic. And to soften that, you can just mist a little bit of water. It also depends on the paper you're using, and this is the student grade watercolor paper that I'm not so happy with. The one that you have looks better than this one. This was a new one I was testing for next semester for the fall, because it is a little bit cheaper. And you can go back in and sort of put in a little bit of darker where you think maybe there would be some shadows in the clouds. And you would want to do this while your watercolor is still wet. Otherwise it'll look really blotchy and it won't have soft edges or blend very well. So that's kind of what you can do. And if you wanted like it darker at the horizon, more color there. So that's just a technique you can use with watercolor to make clouds. I'm going to dry this because I'm going to now show you a different way to approach clouds also, is that you can decide, this water's dirty. You can decide that you're going to have a cloud here and here. So maybe you're going to put your water, and it's okay that the water is a little bit colored because now I can see where the water actually is. That's really extreme. I don't want that. So that's better. Where I don't want the watercolor to go, I'm not putting any water down in those areas. And now I can take my color and just sort of drop it in to where there's already water. And it's not going to go in the areas that don't have water. And you don't want this to be totally white, so you might put in a little bit of shadow, clouds. You don't want to use too much water because then you'll get a bunch of blooms. So those are some ideas for clouds. You can also pull some of the color out after you put it in to make it look a little more natural. So that's it for that. And the last thing I was going to do was just pull out some of my drawing paper and talk about diptych for a minute. So a diptych is basically when you have two drawings that are right next to each other. They're butt up next to each other so that it looks like it's one image. So the reason that you're doing that kind of is because we usually draw on much larger paper, but you don't have much larger paper. So we're drawing on the paper that you have. So this is my 2B pencil. And remember that you're going to be using your watercolor paper or your drawing paper. You can decide depending on the medium that you're using, because you can use whichever medium you want. But your thumbnails, that's what I'm going to talk about. So when you do your thumbnails, you're going to do diptych thumbnails, which means that there's going to be two drawings for each thumbnail. So this could be, one thumbnail. Maybe this thumbnail, let's see if you can see that. Maybe this thumbnail is going to be vertical, and you're going to place another drawing and have a very vertically oriented drawing. So there's one drawing here and one drawing here. Maybe we're going to place them next to each other like this. I think like that's the two options you have. Oh, another thing is that they don't have to be equivalent in size. Like if you're using a drawing paper and you're using a bigger sheet, you could have a paper where one of them is the full-size drawing paper, and then you just add a smaller section for your second drawing. You can also do it this way. Remember that you want to try to keep your thumbnails proportional so that whatever you draw in here is going to then fit on the page. If you have a rectangular page like this, and then you start drawing on a page that's square instead of rectangular, then it's going to be difficult to fit everything that's in here into your drawing. So just try to keep your thumbnails in the same proportions to the paper that you're going to draw on. So, so when you do your thumbnails, remember you need a minimum of 3, which means that you're going to have 6 images because you're going to have an image in each one of these. Maybe this one is going to be like some trees here, and maybe there's a walkway that's going on into the sunset, and more trees here. It's a landscape, and there's like ground here, and then maybe sky and clouds up there. So that would be like, and you can do scribbling like this. It's okay for your thumbnails because your thumbnails are for you to know what you're doing. Maybe there's a little shed back here or a house or something. And there, that's one. And then maybe on this one, maybe I want to say, well, my life has been a lot of this cat kind of laying around, but with a lot of medical nebulizer treatment. So he's in a farm. Or, maybe I want to draw my palette, my watercolor palette, and have that. Well, there would be a lot more squares in here, but this is just a thumbnail sketch. On a table with brushes, and maybe let's see, piece of paper, watercolor in the background. So anyway, that's what your thumbnails are for. And I just wanted to make the point that you do want to have 2 drawings in each of your thumbnails for the diptych, because that's what a diptych is. It's 2 drawings, and what you're going to do is you're going to put them like right up next to each other when you submit them. You can take them from behind, or if you can photograph them flat, you could do that and just photograph it as one, because that's what it is. It's a diptych. It's really one drawing, 2 drawings combined to make one drawing. So this one that I thought this one was the one that I drew with the ink pen on, and it seems to have all disappeared. No, it was a different one. This is the one. This is the one where I had drawn with the ink, and you can sort of see, but it worked better when I did a different one. And this is, even though this isn't completely dry, I'm going to take it off so you can sort of see what would happen. Once it dries, it creates a pattern. But you're always going to have this sort of like edge, so you want to be aware of that too. And you can just randomly draw patterns on it if you want. It doesn't have to be a something recognizable. It can just be an abstract image. So that's enough for that. And I think that's it. So Goodbye. Nobody came today again, but I'm going to post this recording and hopefully it'll be helpful to somebody.